But you mentioned there going to New York. That was a big trip, wasn't it, for a girl? I mean, how old would you be? In your late teens, early 20s?
I was just 19.
19. Mm-hmm. So a great big city.
Yeah.
All by trying to be a dancer.
Yeah.
Was it tough?
It wasn't tough. I was very close to home. I was very close to my parents. You know, Washington is where I was born and raised, so it's only a 5-hour drive. But I did get a one-bedroom apartment, actually a one-room apartment with a lot of cockroaches, lots of cockroaches.
You had a cockroach problem, did you?
Yeah. Well, they became my friends after a while. Yeah, because I had, no roommate. So it was me, the cockroaches, and a few other stories, which we don't have time to go into. I'm used to them, though.
But what about you were earning money, earning a living, dancing in bars and places like that. Tell us about that, to describe what kind of work you were doing at that time. Because that must have been tough, for a young girl.
Well, it was the late 60s, or mid-60s, actually, and I was a go-go girl. And I became a go-go girl because it was a way to pay my rent. So if I went away for the weekend, say, and I did 3 gigs, I'd get $25 a night. That was $75 a week, and I could pay my rent. Aside from the $20 my dad would send me from the watch shop now and then just to get along, or go have some blintzes, or go have a hot fudge sundae. But basically, it was pretty awful, to tell you the truth.
In what way?
Well, it was degrading, really. I mean,
you felt that?
I did feel that. There were some things I did that weren't, and some gigs and shows that I did. But one time I was in a cage, and I remember dancing in the cage, and I just come back from summer stock where I was doing Guys and Dolls. You know, anyone seen an earring around here? You know, that character. And I was dancing and everything in the thing, and I was giving it all that I was worth and all this stuff. And this guy, I looked down, and he had his nose pressed up against the glass, just kind of looking at me, and I went, ooh, I thought, look what I'm doing. Look at what I'm doing. So then a man came up to me, I won't mention his name, quite a big wig at that time in New York, and he said, when you go on your break, there's a guy at the bar who wants to talk to you. And I said, oh, that's nice. I said, but I don't do that. I'm just a dancer. He said, well, no, that's part of what you have to do. I said, well, then I'm leaving. I quit. And I picked up my bag and took my mesh tights and my fringed outfit, and I left. So that's what it was like.
Yes, not good at all. In the book as well, I mean, that must have been particularly horrific for you, because in the book, and you say it's an important part of your book, you talk about your childhood, and you talk about being molested when you were a child of 11. And you say in the book, this explains an awful lot of it, this is why it's important.
Yes.
I imagine that having that job that you had and thinking back to that moment in time, that must have been particularly difficult, I would have thought, was it?
The book is just vignettes of my life that actually taught me something. At the end of that story, where this man did molest me...
And he was a friend of the family?
He was a friend of the family.
You were 11?
And I was 11. And it was Christmas Eve, is that the way it was handled with so much love and so much care, and molested, not raped, mind you, so that's a very different, very dramatic thing. But my mother was amazing, because she didn't do this thing that happens, which is imprinting all of this negativity. She said to me, he's a sick boy, honey, you're okay, I want you to go to sleep. And the boys went out to go chase him down because they were quite angry with him. I had lots of support. But when you take a problem, especially with a child, and you continue to imprint on their minds the negativity and the horror of the moment, then that's how their brain will remember it. Our brains are just these wonderful little internet computer type things. So she didn't.
So you moved on.
I just moved on, you know.
And it didn't have any lasting effect on your...
It really didn't have a lasting effect. I didn't feel bad about myself. I didn't, so I had more compassion for him, actually, than I would fear for myself.
When you're looking back at that kind of episode in your life, I mean, it was interesting that the first film you ever made was Cactus Flow.
It is, why?
Well, why? Because you starred with Ingrid Bergman.
Oh, that's right.
And here, if we're talking about women who have had problems, I mean, here was the classic example. And in your very first movie, you're up against this extraordinary woman who was neglected by, in fact, blackballed by Hollywood for 10 years because she had an affair.
I know.
When you think about it now, and at that time, too, a liberated woman, you thought, what the hell is happening here?
I know. Well, it's an interesting subject about so-called liberation, because I remember when I was on Laugh-In, and I was playing the ditzy blonde, and it was a job, actually, because I had to do it on cue and so forth. So, I mean, it was really trying to empty your mind and be silly and funny and goofy and, sort of stupid and airheaded and bubbly and all that. When, in fact, I wasn't. But, again, part of the essence of the character, right? But one man came up, he was an interviewer, and he said, well, how does it feel, you know, what you're doing? And women are now ripping off their bras, and they're all liberated. And I said to him, do you mean liberated emotionally, or do you mean liberated with the fact of society? Because frankly, we can only change society in tiny little increments. I mean, look at where we are today in women, right? We're talking about burning bras in the 60s. And women are still struggling with the glass ceiling. So, you know, and we've come so far.
But you say that, and yet you challenged the glass ceiling, certainly, didn't you, in Hollywood, because you became one of the first women to actually produce and to organize a film, Private Benjamin.
Right.
And that gave you a kind of status that women hitherto hadn't got. Are you saying that was an illusion, that's not developed at all?
No, it isn't an illusion. It's true. There are more women producing now than ever, and they're doing it quite effectively. So I feel very good about that. Why did I produce Private Benjamin? Not because I was trying to prove something to someone, because we knew everything there was to know about making the film, and we said, well, why don't we do it? Why do we need another hand in the pot? Yeah. It was a practical decision.
Yes. But nonetheless went against the grain and had repercussions in your relationships, I would imagine, with certain men in Hollywood.
Unfortunately, when a woman is powerful or when she's well-known or a luminary, that the terrible thing is when you walk into a room and your husband or your spouse or your boyfriend is not as successful, right? They always come to you first. So eventually it's going to wear on that man, that gentleman or woman, whoever it is you're with, and it really makes you feel terrible. So as the object of everyone's affection, you're always going, oh, and this is, and you're so torn and so pulled because there's so much going toward you and not enough going to your spouse. Well, eventually, symptomatically, things come out in a way that really makes it difficult for the relationship. Sure. So you're always compromising. My first year of being married and suddenly this boom, laughing and this big success, I was so concerned about my relationship that I stayed home. I didn't go to the parties. I didn't do the things. I wasn't seen around because I wanted to be home with him. I wanted to make sure that he knew that. Until I'd knitted so many sweaters, I figured that, well, I think I have time for that in my life.
Well, I tell you what, you must tell me, before we ask the general question,
yeah.
You must tell me about that lovely story about Peter Sellers, because you worked with Peter Sellers, didn't you?
I did.
There's a Girl in My Soup.
I did. It was my second movie.
And how do you find him?
I found him very strange. He was, and you know, and I was a young person then, and
you're very young, yeah.
And I was newly married, and so that was good. Although at that time he and Britt, I think, were kind of splitting up, but she was still around and all of that, and so I didn't have any of that man-female, potential whatever. So there was a great friendship that ensued. But we went to this park, and he took me in his Rolls Royce, and he said, we're going out for the day. And we went then to the people who were the proprietors of this place, I think, and they were all little people, and they owned the park. Well, that's when I thought I was really on drugs, because now it was like being inside of a circus. And Peter, of course, is like being on drugs, too, being with him, because you never know what was going to pop up. He said, let's go watch the baboons. So we got into his car, just the two of us, and we sat there in this gorgeous Rolls Royce of his and watch the baboons come up onto the top of the car, not just crashing the paint job on the car, and they were just doing all kinds of disgusting things on the thing, and he was laughing. He was like, big laugh. For 20, 30 minutes we sat there and watched the baboons in their big red hoo-hoos, up in the thing and whatever. And I'm telling you, I said, this has been a day I'll never forget between the little people and the baboons and Peter Sellers. It was pretty great.
Yeah. But just finally, and going back to this thing about summing up your life, I mean, it's far from over. I mean, you're a busy person. I mean,
I'm so busy.
So there's another book ahead, no
Oh,
doubt.
I don't know. There may be. I'm sure there is. I'm already, sort of germinating ideas.
Yeah.
But now, at this time in my life, I'm busier than ever. It's just incredible. I mean, there's so much going on. Sweetie, it's so good to see you again. Oh, my God. What a treat.
Goldie Hawn.